feels to me like the substance of the record is better than the politics of the record, which is sort of surprising to me in the sense that he was such an effective candidate last time. And there does seem to be, they seem to be, as I started to say earlier, I think they seem to be shy in some ways about touting the record. I think that given the situation that he inherited, 2 wars, a devastated economy, a clear desire to do something about health care, now we're basically down to 1 war. The economy, although it's nobody's favorite at the moment, it clearly has stabilized. There's some evidence of growth. They got a health care bill that every president, for the better part of a century has been trying to get. So I think they have a lot to be proud of, and I think that they don't do a very effective job of taking credit for all of that and making it clear the degree of challenge that they faced and the degree of accomplishment that they've achieved. It is obviously different to govern than it is to run. And there is a kind of poetry about running, and there's a real prose to governing. And it may be that in that slippage, that they're not, that they're better at one thing than the other. Or it may be that they're just sort of learning it. I think it has not been either the economy or the country that Obama ran to run. Let's remember the economy really didn't collapse until well into the presidential. This was a campaign initially founded on the idea that it was going to be a war campaign, not an economy campaign. In the end, I think that helped Obama because voters perceived McCain as really woefully unprepared to deal with an economic catastrophe. And I think the administration has done a good job of stabilizing the economy. But this is not the mandate that they came to execute. So I do think that it took them a while to kind of readjust to what their priorities were. Yeah, it's funny to watch Sarah Palin, because everyone sort of is attracted and repelled by her in kind of equal measure. She clearly is a fundraising gem for the party. She goes around, draws a lot of attention wherever she goes. She can raise money hand over fist. On the other hand, she's a slightly poisonous partner. You don't see Meg Whitman touting her great relationship with Sarah Palin. When Sarah Palin comes up, she likes to point out that she's also supported Romney and McCain over the years. And so she sort of dilutes Palin's endorsement and support. Looking ahead to 2012, which is I'm sure where Sarah Palin is looking, it seems to me that she is too strong to be beaten easily anyway in a Republican primary and too weak to win in a general. And so that's the jam that she's put herself and the party in, is that if no Republican can get by her but she can't win the general, then she may have locked them into a really difficult situation politically. And I guess I don't see any way that Palin will ever, in a Republican primary, that she's ever going to drop below 25 or 30%. But it's very hard for me to see how she gets to 51 too. She carries with her a hardcore of very committed supporters, but they're a relatively unforgiving bunch of supporters. That if she takes positions to her left in order to sort of co-opt the middle, I think she risks losing some of her hardcore support. So she's got a tough path to follow ahead too. First of all, I would refer to it as Tea Parties. I really do think they are, each Tea Party and each state, and sometimes even within states, I think has its own kind of orientation. Some are much more ideologically conservative, I think, than others. And it does feel to me like the Tea Parties are going to play out very differently state to state. It seems like they are running quite strong in Alaska, in Kentucky, possibly in Nevada. On the other hand, I don't see it materializing much in the California race. I think that Fiorina is the biggest test case of the Tea Party's strength statewide in California. It feels to me like she's probably fading. So I think that it's not really properly thought of as even a national phenomenon. I think it's a collection of local phenomena that are reacting to some national forces. I also do not imagine it having much staying power beyond this election, but I do think it will change some races in this cycle. And I think there is this vague sense that the government has gotten sort of out of people's control. And the health care bill may be the most sort of vivid example of that. I guess I'm struck though by the number of people who are so suspicious of the health care bill and yet remain adamantly defensive about Medicare and Social Security. And so I don't really know that there's a coherent philosophy that stitches all that together. I think it's more of an anxiety. And I think if the economy were better, it would be much less palpable. At the same time, I think the Obama administration is too shy about its record. And I think it's allowed this sense to take hold that there's something profoundly wrong with its record, when I think its record overall is relatively successful. Well, right. I guess I would say that obviously the first question is what happens to the Congress in this election, because that's who's up. It does not seem to me likely that the Senate will fall into Republican control. That the Democratic majority in the Senate will come down, but not come down below half. And at some level, it's sort of academic, the question between having 59 votes and 51 in the Senate. If you don't have 60, you're not filibuster-proof. If you have less than 50, then you're clearly always battling uphill. They'll be somewhere in the middle, which is where they are now. So they will always be in the hunt for a little bit of Republican support on anything that Republicans are prepared to filibuster, which these days seems like almost anything. I think the situation in the House is less clear. I think there it is quite possible that the Republicans could take a majority in the House, and clearly that'll make the work of the Obama administration much harder. At the same time, you sort of have to be careful what you wish for in some of these races. And if the Republicans do take a majority of either house, more likely the House of Representatives and the Senate, if they are in the majority, they will be expected to produce something. And really, most of their success politically so far has been at stopping or opposing initiatives of the Obama administration. I think there will be some onus on them to sort of put up or shut up, and that may be uncomfortable. Particularly, I think, if the message out of this election is that the Republican Party sees success by tacking to its right and by becoming more conservative. Because while that may be a useful midterm political strategy, I think it's not a terribly productive strategy for 2012. It's going to be hard to run a more conservative ticket to beat Obama. And I suspect that's what the Obama people are hoping for, is that the Republican Party will view its future as a more conservative party than it is today. I do think that there is a kind of a narrative that's set in Washington, which is that this is an unsuccessful first half of the Obama administration, and that this election will be the sort of reckoning for that. I'm not sure that it has been an unsuccessful first half, and I'm not sure that the election will be a reckoning for it. So I'm not. I think that there's a certain glibness that infects a lot of the coverage with respect to that kind of big storyline. I think I'm much more persuaded that there will be many races, state by state, sometimes community by community, that will tip in different directions. Some of them will be in repudiation of what they see as a failure in Washington. Some, I think, will go the other way. So I don't think that the big story narrative is as persuasive as it's somehow led to be. But I couldn't point you to any specific article or any specific point of coverage that has fallen down on that. That's more of a sort of macro observation. As to the state races and local races, I think, it is no secret that media, and the LA Times in particular, are not staffed to cover these things the way we once were. But the coverage I've seen, I think, has been sharp. It's been the daily developments have been well recorded. There have been good profiles, good analyses of the campaign. So I think in general, I'm fairly impressed with the job that the Times and others have done in covering this race. Yeah, I think that Citizens United is a terribly difficult decision to evaluate in some ways. And I think just on First Amendment grounds, there's a certain sense to it. Why should General Motors have less ability to speak its politics than Tribune Corporation? So I do think there is a solid First Amendment basis for doing what the court did, if you accept the premise that money is speech and protected as speech, and that's obviously people disagree about that. What is not disputable is that this is the first election cycle in which we will see its effects at work. And already, I think there's no question but that a great deal of corporate money is being put to use in races. Some of it is being funneled by political operatives to use it to its maximum effect. There's obviously going to be union money in there too. So it's not all on one side of the ledger or the other, although I suspect what we'll see is more corporate money than union money and when it's all sifted out. I don't think there's any question but that the infusion of that kind of money, especially if it's strategically targeted, could tip some of these very close races. And that's a policy question. I think that the Congress and President, next Congress, and this President are going to have to tackle is how much damage does that do to the integrity of our elections? And this election will clearly be a test case of it.